The rain hammered against the canvas roof with such force that Sister Anna Hartmann could barely hear the cries of the wounded men lying in the makeshift ward. April 16th, 1945. A converted schoolhouse near Düren, Germany. The acrid smell of antiseptic mixed with something worse, the unmistakable odor of infected wounds left untreated for too long. Anna's hands never stopped moving as she changed the bandage on a young soldier's shrapnel wound, her fingers working with the practiced precision of someone who had done this thousands of times before. But those hands trembled now, not from exhaustion, though she hadn't slept in 36 hours, but from the knowledge of what was coming. The rumble of engines grew louder. American tanks. Everyone in the hospital knew what that sound meant. Sister Hartmann. Dr. Friedrich Keller appeared at her side, his white coat stained with blood that had long since dried to rust. At 52, he had been a distinguished surgeon in Hamburg before the war transformed him into something else entirely, a man who performed amputations by candlelight and made impossible decisions about who would receive their dwindling supply of morphine. The Americans are less than a kilometre away. We need to prepare the patients for... An explosion cut him off. Not close, perhaps 300 metres to the east, but close enough to rattle the windows and send a cascade of dust falling from the ceiling. Anna instinctively covered her patient's face with her body, protecting him from the debris. When she looked up, she saw fear flickering across Dr. Keller's usually stoic features. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Through the grimy window, Anna could see the Red Cross flag still flying above the building, its white background and crimson symbol, supposedly offering protection under the Geneva Convention. But she had seen too much to believe in the sanctity of symbols anymore. The Eastern Front had taught her that lesson in blood. "How many patients can walk?" she asked Dr. Keller, her voice steadier than she felt. "Perhaps 12, the others." He gestured helplessly at the rows of beds filling what had once been a classroom. 43 men lay in various states of injury. Amputations, burns, internal bleeding, infections that were slowly consuming them from within. Moving them would kill most of them. Staying might kill all of them. Sister Elizabeth Koch hurried past, her arms loaded with bandages. At 28, Elizabeth had been Anna's closest friend since their training days in Munich. They had shared a room during their Red Cross instruction, whispered doubts about the Reich's promises in the darkness, and survived the nightmare of Stalingrad together. Now, her blonde hair had come loose from its pins, plastered against her pale face by rain and sweat. "The supply room," Elizabeth called out. "Dr. Keller, we need to hide the morphine. If the Americans confiscate it, there's nowhere to hide it," Anna interrupted, more sharply than she intended. "They'll search everything. You know they will." The truth was, they had almost no morphine left anyway. 2 vials for 43 men. Anna had been rationing it so carefully that most of their patients endured procedures with nothing more than a leather strap to bite down on. She had heard their screams. She had learned to keep working through them. The sound of gunfire erupted close by rifle shots, sharp and distinct. Then silence. Then voices shouting in English. Dr. Keller straightened his coat, as if proper appearance might matter in what came next. "Everyone, listen to me." His voice carried across the ward with the authority of a man who had commanded operating rooms in peacetime. "The Americans are here. You will remain calm. You will continue caring for your patients. You will remember that you are medical personnel, protected under international law." But Anna saw the doubt in his eyes. Protected. What did that word even mean anymore? The Geneva Convention had been signed in 1929, drafted by men in comfortable rooms who believed that civilization could constrain warfare with rules and signatures. Those men had never stood in a field hospital with the enemy at the gates. Sister Margaret Werner, the oldest of their nursing staff at 35, began praying softly. The rosary beads moved through her fingers with mechanical rhythm. Anna envied her faith. Her own prayers had died somewhere on the frozen steppes of Russia, buried alongside the men she couldn't save. The main doors exploded inward with a crash that sent splinters flying across the floor. American soldiers poured through the opening, rifles raised, faces hard with the adrenaline of combat. Their uniforms were mud-caked, their eyes scanning for threats with predatory focus. "Hands up! Hände hoch!" The commands came in both English and badly accented German. "Everyone against the wall! Now!" Anna's arms rose slowly, her body moving on instinct even as her mind struggled to process what was happening. Beside her, Elizabeth had gone rigid, her face drained of all colour. Dr. Keller stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We are medical staff," he said in careful English. "This is a field hospital. Our patients need—" "Shut up and get against the wall." A young sergeant, his face barely visible beneath a helmet, gestured violently with his rifle. "Move!" They moved. Anna found herself pressed against the wall between Elizabeth and Sister Margaret, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The American soldiers fanned out through the ward, checking under beds, throwing open cabinets, their boots tracking mud across the floor she had mopped just that morning. One soldier stopped at a patient's bed. The man lying there, Private Werner Schultz, had lost both legs below the knee to a landmine. His stumps were wrapped in bandages that Anna had changed 3 hours earlier. He stared up at the American with terrified eyes. "Please," Anna called out before she could stop herself. "He's injured. He needs to remain still or the bleeding." I said, "Shut up." The sergeant whirled on her, his rifle pointing directly at her chest. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Anna stared down the barrel of that weapon and thought about her mother back in Stuttgart. If she was even still alive. The last letter had come 4 months ago. A new voice cut through the tension, deeper and calmer than the sergeant's. "Stand down, Morrison. They're medical personnel." An American officer pushed through the doorway, his captain's bars visible even in the dim light. He was older than most of the soldiers, perhaps 40, with grey threading through his dark hair and deep lines carved around his eyes. He surveyed the scene with a practiced gaze, taking in the rows of wounded men, the medical supplies, the nurses pressed against the wall. "Doctor?" he asked, looking at Dr. Keller. "Yes, Dr. Friedrich Keller, Chief Medical Officer of this facility." The American officer nodded. "Captain James Porter, 89th Medical Battalion." His German was halting but comprehensible. "Your patients, German soldiers?" "Of course." "How many nurses?" 6, all properly trained and certified by the German Red Cross. Captain Porter's eyes moved across the line of women against the wall, assessing them with the same professional detachment he had given the wounded men. Anna forced herself to meet his gaze, though everything in her wanted to look away. She had been trained to show deference to male authority, to maintain proper feminine modesty, but something in this moment demanded that she not flinch. "The hospital is now under American control," Porter announced. "Your patients will be treated as prisoners of war. Your medical staff will be processed according to Geneva Convention protocols." "And our supplies?" Dr. Keller asked. "Many of these men require immediate care. We have almost no morphine. Our bandages are nearly exhausted, and your supplies will be inventoried and secured." Porter's tone allowed no argument. "Sergeant Morrison, post guards at all exits. No one enters or leaves without my authorization." The next hours blurred into a nightmare of bureaucratic efficiency. American medics moved through the ward, making notes on clipboards, photographing wounds, cataloguing supplies. Anna and the other nurses were separated from the patients, taken to a small room that had once been the principal's office, and told to wait. Through the window, Anna watched as more American vehicles arrived. Trucks loaded with supplies, ambulances, more soldiers. The school's courtyard, already churned to mud by weeks of rain, became a staging area for what looked like a much larger operation than simply securing one small field hospital. "They're going to kill us," Elizabeth whispered, her voice breaking. "They're going to line us up and stop it." Anna grabbed her friend's hand, squeezing hard. "We're medical personnel. They can't they?" Sister Margaret spoke from her corner, her rosary still moving through her fingers. Who's going to stop them? The Geneva Convention? International law? She laughed bitterly. We're defeated. We have no rights, only what they choose to give us. The door opened. Captain Porter entered, followed by another American officer wearing medical insignia. This second man was younger, perhaps 35, with red hair and freckles that made him look almost boyish despite his rank. I'm Captain David Mitchell, the red-haired officer said in near-perfect German, Chief Medical Officer for this sector. I need to understand your capabilities. He looked directly at Anna. You're a nurse? Yes, sir. Sister Anna Hartmann. I trained at the Red Cross facility in Munich from 1940 to 1942. General nursing, but I've worked primarily in trauma and surgical support. The Eastern Front? Anna hesitated. Admitting she had served in Russia felt dangerous, as if it might somehow mark her as complicit in atrocities she had only heard whispers about. But lying seemed pointless. Yes, sir. Stalingrad. Then Western theatre assignments. Mitchell made a note. You, he pointed at Elizabeth. Your name and training? Elizabeth's voice shook as she answered, but she got through it. One by one, Mitchell interviewed each nurse, documenting their experience, their specializations, their service history. He was thorough, professional, and utterly impersonal. Anna found something almost reassuring in his clinical detachment. This wasn't hatred. This was assessment. When he finished, Mitchell exchanged a glance with Captain Porter. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Porter spoke. We have a situation developing. In the next 48 hours, we're expecting a massive influx of German prisoners from units surrendering across this sector. We're talking about thousands of men. Many will be wounded, some critically. Our medical facilities are already overwhelmed. Anna's mind raced ahead, seeing where this was going even before Porter finished speaking. We don't have enough trained personnel to handle the load, Mitchell continued, but you do. You've been treating these patients. You know their conditions. You have the experience we need. You want us to work for you, Dr. Keller said slowly, his tone unreadable. We want you to continue doing what you're already doing, Porter corrected, caring for wounded men, except now you'll be doing it under American supervision as part of our medical operation. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush bones. Anna stared at the two American officers, trying to understand what they were, really offering, or demanding. The line between the two seemed dangerously blurred. And if we refuse? Dr. Keller asked. Porter's expression didn't change. Then you'll be processed as prisoners of war and transported to a holding facility. Your patients will be transferred to American medical personnel who are already stretched beyond capacity. Many will likely die who might otherwise survive. That's not a threat, Doctor. It's simply the reality of our resource limitations. Anna felt Elizabeth's hand find hers, cold and trembling. They both understood what Porter was really saying. Refuse, and the men they had been caring for their patients, their countrymen, boys who had endured so much already would suffer even more. Accept, and they would be collaborating with the enemy. But were they really the enemy anymore? Anna looked at Captain Mitchell's face, at the fatigue carved into his features, the weight of responsibility he carried. She had seen that same expression on Dr. Keller's face countless times, the burden of knowing that every decision you made would mean life or death for someone. How long would we be required to serve? Anna heard herself asking. Mitchell's eyes met hers with something that might have been respect. Until the immediate crisis is resolved, several weeks probably, maybe longer. Several weeks, working alongside American medical staff, caring for German prisoners under enemy supervision. The thought felt surreal, impossible to grasp, yet the alternative being shipped away while men died for lack of care felt worse. I need to consult with my staff, Dr. Keller said. Porter nodded. You have 30 minutes. The Americans left, posting a guard outside the door. Anna listened to their footsteps fade down the corridor before turning to face her colleagues. In the fading afternoon light, they all looked impossibly young, even Sister Margaret, young and frightened and utterly lost. "What do we do?" Elizabeth whispered. Dr. Keller sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 52 years. "We do what we've always done. We care for the wounded." "But they're Americans," Sister Margaret protested. "They killed our soldiers. They destroyed our cities. How can we work with them?" "They're doctors and nurses," Anna said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Just like us. And our patients, those men out there, they need us. Does it really matter who's giving the orders if the work remains the same?" "It matters to the Führer," Sister Margaret said stubbornly. "It matters to Germany." "Germany is dying," Dr. Keller said bluntly. "Maybe it's already dead, and we just haven't admitted it yet. Those men out there, though they're still alive. As long as they're alive, we have a duty to them." He looked around the room, meeting each nurse's eyes. "I'm going to accept Captain Porter's proposal. Anyone who wants to refuse, I'll support your decision. But know that refusal means leaving your patients behind." The weight of that choice pressed down on Anna like a physical thing. She thought about Private Schultz, the double amputee who called her Schwester Anna with such trust in his eyes. She thought about Corporal Meyer, recovering from a stomach wound that would have killed him if she hadn't spent 3 hours holding pressure on the bleeder. She thought about all the others, 43 men who knew her voice, her touch, her care. Could she really walk away from them? More importantly, should she? The question had no good answer. Only impossible ones. "I'll stay," Anna said. Elizabeth looked at her, eyes wide. "Anna." "I'll stay," Anna repeated. "I'm a nurse. That's all I've ever been. If I can't do that anymore, then what am I?" One by one, the others made their choices. Elizabeth, after a long moment of internal struggle, nodded. Sister Margaret kept her rosary moving, but she also nodded. The 2 younger nurses, barely 20 years old, followed suit. Only Sister Helena Braun, a stern woman of 40 who had always worn her Nazi party pin alongside her Red Cross badge, stood apart. "I won't collaborate with the enemy. I won't betray everything Germany has fought for." "Then I wish you well," Dr. Keller said quietly. "I hold no judgment against you." When Captain Porter returned exactly 30 minutes later, Dr. Keller delivered their decision. Porter's expression revealed nothing, but Captain Mitchell looked almost relieved. "Good," Porter said. "You made the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one." He glanced at Sister Helena. "You'll be transported to a POW processing center within the hour. The rest of you will report to Captain Mitchell for orientation. We start at 0600 hours tomorrow." As Helena was led away by an American guard, Anna felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that the decision was made. Guilt that she had chosen survival and purpose over some abstract loyalty to a Reich that had brought nothing but destruction to the world. But when she returned to the ward and saw Private Schultz's face light up at her appearance, when he reached out his hand and she took it, offering comfort in his fear in that moment, Anna knew she had made the only choice she could live with. The war had turned her into many things: a witness to horrors, a participant in a system that had committed unspeakable crimes, a woman forced to make impossible decisions every single day. But through it all, beneath all the compromises and trauma and moral ambiguity, she was still a nurse, and wounded men still needed care. That would have to be enough. It was all she had left. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the mud and blood and ash of a dying Reich. Somewhere beyond the ruins of Düren, American and Soviet forces were tightening their grip on what remained of Germany. The end was coming, inevitable as sunrise. But in this converted schoolhouse, surrounded by wounded men and uncertain futures, Anna Hartmann began a journey she could never have imagined, one that would test everything she believed about duty, humanity, and the lines that separated enemies from allies. The first night working under American command would arrive in a few short hours, and with it, a reckoning. The pre-dawn darkness felt absolute. Anna stood in what had been the school's cafeteria, now transformed overnight into a makeshift triage center. American soldiers had worked through the night, setting up additional beds, organizing supplies with an efficiency that bordered on mechanical. Electric lights now illuminated the space, a luxury she hadn't experienced in months. The German electrical grid had been shattered by bombing, leaving them to work by candlelight and hope. Captain Mitchell entered at precisely 0600 hours, accompanied by an American nurse Anna hadn't seen before. The woman was perhaps 30, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that assessed everything with clinical precision. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Cohen," Mitchell said. "She'll be coordinating nursing assignments. Lieutenant, these are the German nurses who've agreed to assist." Cohen's gaze swept across Anna and her colleagues. Her expression revealed nothing, but Anna noticed the slight tightening around her eyes when she looked at their German Red Cross uniforms. Whatever thoughts moved behind that carefully neutral face remained hidden. "You'll work in pairs," Cohen announced in flawless German. "One American nurse, one German nurse, at all times, no exceptions." She pulled out a clipboard. "Sister Hartmann, you're with me. Sister Koch, you're with Lieutenant Mary Thompson. Sister Werner, Lieutenant Patricia O'Brien." Anna felt Elizabeth's quick glance in her direction, a silent question about whether this arrangement was surveillance or genuine partnership. Probably both, Anna thought. "First convoy arrives in 30 minutes, Mitchell continued. Approximately 200 German prisoners from units that surrendered near Cologne. Initial reports indicate multiple cases of malnutrition, untreated wounds, probable typhus outbreak." He paused, letting the severity sink in. "Gentlemen and ladies, we're about to face something none of us are fully prepared for. Set aside whatever differences you have. Focus on the work. Lives depend on it." The first trucks arrived just as grey dawn light began filtering through the windows. American soldiers opened the canvas flaps, and the true horror of Germany's collapse became visible. These weren't the soldiers Anna had treated in previous months, men wounded in combat but still possessing some essential vitality. These were walking ghosts, skeletal figures in tattered uniforms, their faces hollowed by starvation, their eyes vacant with exhaustion and defeat. Many could barely walk. Some had wounds that had gone untreated for weeks, the flesh around them, greenish-black with infection. "Mein Gott," Elizabeth whispered beside Anna. Lieutenant Cohen's voice cut through the shocked silence. "Triage stations, now. Critical cases to the left, walking wounded to the right. Move." Anna's training took over, overriding the horror. She moved to the first man being helped off the truck, a soldier who couldn't have been older than 19, his left arm wrapped in a filthy bandage that hadn't been changed in days. When she carefully unwrapped it, the smell nearly overwhelmed her. Gas gangrene. The tissue was already dead, turning black. Without immediate amputation, the infection would kill him within 24 hours. "Critical," she called out, marking his jacket with chalk. Surgical intervention required immediately. Cohen appeared at her side, took one look at the arm, and nodded. "Agreed. Next patient." They fell into a rhythm. Anna would assess, Cohen would verify, and together they would make the determination that sent men to different fates. It was brutal, mechanical, necessary work. There was no time for emotion, no space for the enormity of what they were witnessing. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. By mid-morning, they had processed nearly 100 men. Anna's uniform was stained with blood, and worse. Her hands moved automatically now, checking pulses, examining wounds, making notes. Beside her, Cohen worked with the same grim efficiency. "You trained at Munich?" Cohen asked during a brief pause as they waited for the next group. Yes, 1940 to 1942. Good program? Anna hesitated. How to explain the German Red Cross training, which had blended genuine medical instruction with Nazi ideology. The medical training was thorough, the rest. She trailed off, unsure how to finish. The rest was propaganda. Cohen finished flatly. We know. We've interrogated. Enough German medical personnel. Anna met her eyes, seeing something sharp and knowing there. You speak German very well. I'm from Berlin originally. My family left in 1933. Cohen's voice remained carefully neutral, but Anna understood immediately. Jewish. Cohen was Jewish, and here they were, working side by side, German nurse and Jewish American nurse, sorting through the wreckage of a war that had tried to exterminate one of them. I'm sorry, Anna said quietly. For everything. For what happened to... Don't. Cohen cut her off. I don't need your apologies. I need your medical skills. There's a difference. The rebuke stung, but Anna accepted it. What right did she have to offer apologies? She hadn't been in the camps, hadn't known the full extent of what was happening, but she had known enough. They all had. The whispers, the rumours, the disappearances, the willful blindness that had allowed it all to continue. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. American medics were carrying in a stretcher bearing a German soldier who was screaming in delirium, his body convulsing. Anna moved toward him instinctively, her assessment beginning before she even reached the stretcher. Typhus, she said immediately, recognizing the characteristic rash, the fever-induced confusion. High fever, probable neurological involvement. He needs isolation immediately. We don't have isolation facilities, Cohen said, her jaw tightening. The quarantine area won't be ready until this afternoon. Then we make one. Anna looked around the crowded cafeteria. That corner room, the one you're using for storage. Clear it. It's small enough to isolate and large enough for multiple beds, because he won't be the only case. Cohen's eyes narrowed. You're certain about the typhus? I've seen it before. Russia, mostly. But also here, in the last months. The conditions in German units, overcrowding, poor sanitation, lack of clean water, it's perfect for typhus. Anna gestured at the line of prisoners, still waiting to be processed. Look at them. Half are malnourished, their immune systems compromised. If we don't establish proper quarantine protocols immediately, this entire facility could become infected. For a moment, Cohen studied her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Then she nodded sharply. Captain Mitchell, we need to establish typhus protocols now. What followed was a controlled chaos of reorganization. The storage room was cleared and converted into an isolation ward within 2 hours. By then, 3 more suspected typhus cases had been identified. Anna found herself working alongside American medics and nurses, everyone temporarily united by the urgent need to contain the outbreak before it spread. Dr. Keller appeared during the reorganization, his face drawn with exhaustion. He had been in surgery since 0600, performing amputations on men whose infected limbs could not be saved. How many typhus cases? He asked Anna. 4 confirmed, 6 suspected. And Captain? These are just from the first convoy. Mitchell says there are 2 more coming today. Keller's expression grew even grimmer. Do the Americans have vaccine? Limited supply. They're vaccinating their own personnel first, which is protocol, but Mitchell has agreed to vaccinate medical staff regardless of nationality. Smart. Can't treat patients if we're all sick. Keller pulled off his surgical gloves, disposing of them with weary precision. How are you managing? With the Americans? Anna thought about Lieutenant Cohen's sharp competence, the way they had worked together despite everything. Better than expected. They're professionals. So are we, Keller said quietly. That's what we need to remember. Whatever uniform we wore, Whatever ideology we served or thought we were serving, we're medical professionals first. But Anna wondered if it was really that simple. Could you separate the medicine from the system that had shaped it? She had been trained by a Red Cross that had expelled Jewish members, that had taught racial hygiene alongside anatomy, that had served the machinery of the Nazi state even while claiming humanitarian neutrality. The second convoy arrived at 1400 hours. This one carried even more critical cases, men who had been prisoners themselves, captured by Soviet forces, and then somehow ending up in the American sector during the chaotic final weeks of the war. They brought stories Anna wished she hadn't heard, stories of camps, of death marches, of casual brutality that made her previous understanding of the war's horror seem almost naive. One man, a sergeant named Klaus Hoffmann, grabbed her wrist as she checked his vital signs. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone so emaciated. "You're German," he rasped. "Really German?" "Yes. I'm Sister Anna Hartmann. You're safe now. You're going to be cared for." Tears began streaming down his hollow cheeks. "I thought when the Americans captured us, I thought we'd be killed. Like the Russians killed our men. Like we killed." He couldn't finish, his face crumpling with exhaustion and something darker. Shame, perhaps. Or guilt. Anna held his hand, saying nothing. What could she say? That it would be all right? Nothing about this was all right. Nothing about any of this had ever been all right. Lieutenant Cohen appeared with a syringe of morphine. "For the pain," she explained, administering it efficiently. As Hoffmann's grip relaxed and his eyes began to close, Cohen looked at Anna. "You did well with him. The human touch, sometimes that's as important as the medicine." It was the first thing resembling praise Cohen had offered. Anna nodded her thanks, surprised by how much the acknowledgement meant. By evening they had processed nearly 400 prisoners. The converted school building was packed beyond capacity, men lying on mattresses in hallways, temporary beds set up in every available space. The isolation ward now held 12 confirmed typhus cases. 3 men had died during surgery, their conditions too far gone when they arrived. Anna found a quiet corner during a brief break, her legs shaking with exhaustion. Elizabeth sank down beside her, wordlessly handing her a tin cup of coffee. Real coffee, something Anna hadn't tasted in over a year. The Americans had access to supplies that seemed almost miraculous after years of German rationing. "Lieutenant Thompson is efficient," Elizabeth said quietly. "Cold, but efficient. She doesn't trust me." "Can you blame her?" "No." Elizabeth sipped her own coffee. "Anna, do you think about what comes after? When this is over, when Germany surrenders, really surrenders, what happens to us?" Anna had been trying not to think about that. The future seemed as uncertain as smoke. "We'll be processed, probably interrogated about our service. Then, I don't know, back to whatever's left of our homes, I suppose." "There's anything left." Elizabeth's voice cracked slightly. "My mother was in Dresden when they bombed it. I haven't heard from her since February." Anna squeezed her friend's hand. Dresden, 135,000 dead in a single night, according to the rumours. The entire city centre obliterated. She thought about her own family in Stuttgart, wondered if they had survived the bombing raids, if they even knew she was alive. "After the war," Elizabeth continued, "do you think people will understand that we did what we could? That we tried to save lives even when everything around us was death?" "I don't know," Anna admitted. "History is written by the victors, and we're on the wrong side of history. We didn't choose this war. Didn't we?" Anna set down her cup. "Maybe not directly. We kept the machinery running. Every wounded soldier we patched up went back to fight, to kill, to participate in." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the entire monstrous apparatus of the Nazi state. "We're nurses. We took an oath," Anna said bluntly. "Following orders, serving the state, doing their duty. When does duty become complicity?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Captain Mitchell found them 10 minutes later. Sister Hartmann, Sister Koch, we need you in the isolation ward. 2 new critical cases. Anna forced her exhausted body upright. The work never stopped. The suffering never ended. All she could do was keep moving forward, one patient at a time. The isolation ward had become a scene from a medieval plague hospital. 12 men lay in various stages of typhus infection, their bodies racked with fever, their minds often lost in delirium. The new cases Mitchell mentioned were both in their early 20s, brothers named Peter and Thomas Richter. They had been captured together, stayed together through processing, and now were dying together. Anna took Peter, Cohen took Thomas. They worked in parallel, checking vitals, administering fever reducers, trying to bring their temperatures down before the fever caused permanent neurological damage. "Sister," Peter mumbled in delirium, his eyes unfocused. "Sister, tell my mother we're coming home. Tell her we'll be there for Christmas." It was May. Christmas was 7 months away. If Peter survived, and that remained uncertain, he wouldn't be home for Christmas. None of them would. The war might be ending, but its aftermath would stretch on for years. "Rest now," Anna told him, wiping his burning forehead with a cool cloth. "Rest and get strong." Across the narrow room, she heard Cohen speaking softly in German to Thomas, her voice surprisingly gentle. Whatever hardness Cohen maintained during triage had softened here, in the presence of men too sick to be enemies. An hour later, Dr. Keller appeared in the doorway, his face grave. "Anna, can I speak with you?" She followed him into the hallway, her stomach tightening with apprehension. Keller rarely pulled her aside unless there was something difficult to discuss. "Captain Mitchell received new orders," Keller said without preamble. "They're establishing a larger medical facility 15 kilometers from here, a proper field hospital to handle the thousands of prisoners still surrendering. We're all being transferred there tomorrow morning." "All of us? The German staff too?" "Yes. Mitchell specifically requested that we continue working with them. He's documented our performance, submitted reports to his superiors. Apparently, the cooperation between German and American medical personnel has exceeded expectations." Keller's mouth twitched in something that might have been a smile. "We're becoming a model for other facilities." Anna wasn't sure how to feel about that. Pride seemed inappropriate. Relief, perhaps. At least they were still useful, still valued for their skills rather than simply processed as prisoners. "There's something else," Keller continued, his voice dropping. "One of the American officers, a Major Burke, he was asking questions about our service history, where we worked, which units we supported. He was particularly interested in anyone who served at camps." Anna's blood went cold. Camps. Concentration camps. Extermination centers. The Americans are beginning their investigations into war crimes. They're building cases, gathering evidence. Keller met her eyes steadily. "Anna, if there's anything in your service record that could be problematic, you need to tell me now." "I served field hospitals and aid stations," Anna said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Stalingrad, then Western positions. I never worked at a camp. Never even saw one." "But you knew they existed." "We all knew." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. We didn't know details, didn't know the full scope, but we knew. Keller nodded slowly. "That's what I told Major Burke, that we were medical personnel, focused on our patients, working within our limited sphere. Whether he believes that." He shrugged. "Time will tell." That night, Anna lay on a cot in the nurses' quarters, a former classroom with 6 beds crammed together, and stared at the ceiling. Around her, her colleagues slept the exhausted sleep of people pushed beyond endurance. But Anna's mind refused to rest. She thought about the oath she had taken in Munich, the oath to serve Germany, to maintain the health of the Volk, to uphold the principles of National Socialist medicine. She had believed it then, or convinced herself she believed it. The ceremony had been impressive flags, speeches, young women in crisp uniforms pledging themselves to something larger than themselves. How young she had been, how naive, and how complicit. The question Elizabeth had asked earlier returned. Would people understand? Would history recognize the impossible position they had been in, serve or be destroyed, comply or be eliminated? Or would they simply be judged as participants in evil, regardless of their individual actions? Anna didn't know. She suspected that history would not be kind, but she also knew that she would keep working, keep trying to save lives, because in the end, that was all she had, the work itself. Divorced from ideology or politics or national identity. A wounded man needed care. She could provide it. Everything else was noise. The new facility, designated Field Hospital 47, was vastly larger than their converted schoolhouse. American military engineers had transformed an abandoned factory complex into a medical center capable of handling 800 patients. Wards, surgical theaters, isolation units, supply depots, everything organized with American efficiency and backed by American resources. Anna stood in the main receiving area on their first morning, overwhelmed by the scale. Trucks were already arriving, disgorging more prisoners. The flood of surrendering German forces seemed endless. Lieutenant Cohen found her there. Impressive, isn't it? It's overwhelming. Get used to it. Mitchell expects we'll be treating at least 3,000 prisoners over the next 2 weeks. Cohen handed her a new duty roster. You're assigned to Ward C surgical recovery. I'll be supervising, but you'll have primary responsibility for post-operative care. Primary responsibility. Anna looked at the roster, seeing German and American nurses mixed throughout true integration, not just supervised cooperation. Captain Mitchell trusts us that much. He trusts competence, Cohen corrected. Prove you're competent, and he'll give you responsibility. Prove you're not. She left the consequence unspoken. Ward C contained 40 beds, all occupied by men recovering from surgery. Amputations, abdominal repairs, shrapnel removals, the full spectrum of combat injuries. Anna began her rounds, checking bandages, monitoring for signs of infection, administering pain medication. At bed 17, she found a familiar face, Private Werner Schultz, the double amputee from the original field hospital. He smiled weakly when he saw her. Sister Anna, they told me you would be here. How are you feeling, Werner? Like half a man. He gestured at his missing legs. But alive. That's more than I expected. Anna adjusted his morphine drip, checking the stumps for any sign of infection. The wounds were healing cleanly. American antibiotics were proving dramatically more effective than anything Germany had possessed. What will happen to me? Werner asked suddenly. After I heal? You'll be processed as a prisoner of war, eventually repatriated to Germany, I imagine. Germany. He laughed bitterly. What Germany? The bombed ruins? The occupied zones? How does a man with no legs survive in that? Anna had no answer. She had been so focused on immediate survival, treat this patient, save this life, that she hadn't fully confronted the larger question of what came after. For soldiers like Werner, for all of them, the future seemed as bleak as the ruins of the Reich. Over the following days, Anna fell into the rhythm of the new facility. The work was demanding but sustainable. American supplies meant they no longer had to ration morphine or reuse bandages. The presence of proper surgical facilities meant they could perform procedures that would have been impossible in the converted schoolhouse. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, the wall between German and American staff began to erode. It started with small things. An American nurse asking Anna's opinion on a wound treatment. A German orderly showing an American medic a more efficient way to organize supplies. Shared meals in the cafeteria where conversation gradually moved beyond purely medical topics. Anna found herself working most closely with Lieutenant Cohen, and their relationship evolved from wary cooperation to something approaching mutual respect. Cohen never mentioned her family's flight from Berlin, never spoke of what the Nazi regime had done to force them out. But sometimes Anna would catch her watching the German patients with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between pity and anger and sorrow. "Why did you stay?" Anna asked one evening as they completed their rounds. "Why not refuse to work with us? I would understand if you hated us all." Cohen was silent for a long moment. "I do hate what your country did, what it tried to do to my people. But you," she gestured at Anna, then around the ward at the other German nurses. "You're not the ideology, you're individuals. Some of you probably believed the propaganda. Some of you went along because it was easier than resisting. Some of you maybe even tried to maintain humanity in an inhumane system. Does that matter, in the end?" "Yes," Cohen said firmly. "It matters. Because if we decide that everyone on the losing side is equally guilty, then we become the monsters. Justice requires distinctions." Anna wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that her attempts to care for patients regardless of orders, her quiet moments of compassion when no one was watching, her refusal to fully embrace the ugliest aspects of Nazi medicine, that those things counted for something. But she couldn't escape the knowledge that she had served the system, had kept it functioning, and that made her complicit, regardless of her individual intentions. The typhus outbreak peaked in the second week. 23 confirmed cases, 5 deaths. But the isolation protocols held. No American personnel contracted the disease, and no secondary outbreak occurred among the general patient population. Captain Mitchell called it a success, though Anna thought 5 deaths was hardly success. 5 men who might have survived in different circumstances. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The news spread through Field Hospital 47 like wildfire. American personnel celebrated cautiously the war in Europe was over, but fighting continued in the Pacific. German personnel reacted with a mixture of relief and grief. Relief that the killing would stop, grief for everything that had been lost. Anna stood in Ward C, watching her patients process the news. Some wept. Some stared at nothing. Some seemed almost grateful. The war that had consumed them, that had taken their limbs and their futures and their innocence, was finally over. "What happens now?" Werner Schultz asked her, echoing the question they all carried. "Now we heal," Anna said, though she wasn't sure which healing she meant. The physical wounds would close, given time and care. But the other wounds, psychological, moral, national, those would take much longer, if they ever healed at all. Captain Mitchell called a meeting of all medical personnel that evening. German and American staff assembled together a sight that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Mitchell stood, at the front, his face showing the weight of command, but also something that might have been hope. "The war in Europe is over," he began. "But our work isn't. We have thousands of men still requiring care. Repatriation will take months, maybe years. This facility will continue operating for the foreseeable future." He paused, looking specifically at the German nurses. "I want to acknowledge the German medical staff. When we first made this arrangement, I wasn't sure it would work. Cooperation between former enemies is never easy, but you've proven yourselves professionals of the highest caliber. You've saved lives, you've maintained standards under impossible conditions, and you've shown that medicine transcends politics." Anna felt tears pricking her eyes. Validation. Things she hadn't realized she desperately needed. "Moving forward," Mitchell continued, "this facility will serve as a model for other prisoner processing centers. The integration we've achieved, here, German and American medical personnel working together, will be studied and potentially replicated across the occupation zone." After the meeting, Dr. Keller approached Anna. "We did something good here," he said quietly. "In the midst of all the horror, all the death, all the destruction, we saved lives. Don't forget that." Anna nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. That night, she wrote a letter to her mother, not knowing if it would ever reach her, not even knowing if her mother still lived. but she wrote anyway, trying to explain what she had experienced, what she had learned, what she had become. "I am not the same person who left Stuttgart," she wrote. "The war changed me, changed all of us. I cannot undo the things I witnessed or the system I served, but I can tell you this, in the darkest moments, when everything seemed lost, I found something worth holding on to. The simple act of caring for another human being, regardless of who they are, or what side they fought on. That matters. It has to matter, because if it doesn't, then nothing does." 3 weeks after Germany's surrender, Major Burke returned to Field Hospital 47. He spent 2 days interviewing German medical personnel, reviewing service records, asking detailed questions about their assignments during the war. Anna's interview lasted nearly 4 hours. "You understand why we're doing this?" Burke asked her. He was a thin man with glasses, more scholar than soldier. "We need to distinguish between ordinary soldiers, ordinary medical personnel, and those who actively participated in war crimes." "I understand." "Did you ever treat concentration camp prisoners?" "No, sir." "Did you ever work at facilities connected to the T4 program?" He was referring to the Nazi euthanasia program, where disabled Germans had been systematically murdered, often with medical participation. "No, sir. I served field hospitals and aid stations, treating combat casualties." "Did you know about these programs?" Anna hesitated. This was the crucial question. The honest answer could condemn her. But lies had brought Germany to ruin. Perhaps truth was all that remained. "I heard rumours," she said carefully. "Whispers about camps, about programs. But I didn't know details. I didn't ask questions. I told myself I was just doing my job, treating my patients, staying in my lane." She met Burke's eyes. "I was a coward, Major. I knew something terrible was happening, and I chose not to look too closely." Burke made notes in silence. "Finally," he said, "willful blindness is different from active participation. Morally troubling, perhaps, but not a war crime. Based on your service record and interviews with American personnel here, I'm classifying you as a non-combatant medical professional with no evidence of criminal activity." Relief flooded through Anna so powerfully she nearly collapsed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Burke said sharply. "I'm not absolving you. I'm making a legal determination. You'll have to live with the moral questions yourself." He was right, of course. She would carry those questions forever. By June, Field Hospital 47 had treated over 4,000 German prisoners. The initial crisis had passed. Now came the long, slow process of healing and repatriation. Anna continued working, watching as her patients gradually transformed from broken soldiers into simply men individuals with hopes and fears and futures that might exist beyond war. One afternoon, as Anna changed Werner Schultz's bandages, he surprised her by asking, "Will you write to me after I'm sent home?" "Write to you?" "I'll be in Munich, at my sister's house." She survived the bombing. "I thought if you're in Stuttgart, maybe you could write. Tell me how you're doing. I'd like to know that you're all right." Anna looked at this young man, this double amputee who would face enormous challenges rebuilding his life in a destroyed country. And she realized that she cared about his future, wanted to know that he would somehow find his way. "Yes," she said, "I'll write." It was a small promise, but it felt like a thread connecting present to future, war to peace, destruction to rebuilding. Lieutenant Cohen found Anna later that day. "I'm being reassigned," she said without preamble. "Back to the States next month." Anna felt an unexpected pang of loss. "I'll miss working with you." "Same." Cohen hesitated, then held out her hand. "You're a good nurse, Hartmann. Keep at it. Germany's going to need people who remember how to care." They shook hands, two women who had been on opposite sides of history's greatest conflict, now united by the simple recognition of shared humanity. As summer deepened and Field Hospital 47 continued its work, Anna began to understand something crucial. She could not undo the past, could not erase her service to a monstrous regime, could not absolve herself of the guilt that came from being German in the era of Hitler. But she could choose how to move forward, could commit herself to healing rather than harm, could remember that beneath uniforms and ideologies and national boundaries there remained something essential and universal, the human capacity for both tremendous evil and tremendous compassion. The war had revealed both. She had witnessed both. And now, in its aftermath, she would have to decide which one to embody. The choice seemed obvious, but living it out day after day, patient after patient, year after year, that would be the real test. On her last evening at Field Hospital 47 before being transferred to a repatriation centre, Anna stood in Ward C one final time. The beds were full of men who would heal, who would go home, who would somehow find ways to live with their wounds and memories and losses. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that proud young woman in Munich, believing she was serving something noble, through the hell of Stalingrad and the slow collapse of everything she thought she knew, to this moment, standing in an American field hospital, having worked alongside the enemy to save German lives. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe. The irony was not lost on her. She had been captured, stripped of agency, forced into cooperation. And in that enforced collaboration, she had found something she had lost during the years of Nazi service, her fundamental identity as a healer. The German nurses who had been captured and then asked to help save wounded German soldiers had wept, not from fear or humiliation, though there had been both, but from the recognition that in caring for their countrymen under American supervision, they were finally, perhaps for the first time since the war began, simply being nurses again, pure and uncomplicated. Serving life instead of death, it wasn't redemption. Anna knew she didn't deserve redemption, but it was purpose. And in a world turned to ash and ruin, purpose was enough to keep moving forward. The light faded from the ward as evening fell. Anna completed her final rounds, checked her final bandages, and walked out into a Germany that no longer existed except as a defeated, occupied territory. But somewhere in the ruins, she thought, perhaps something new could grow, something better, built by people who had learned hard lessons about ideology and authority and the cost of willful blindness. She hoped so, she had to hope so. Because the alternative that all of this suffering meant nothing, taught nothing, changed nothing was too terrible to contemplate. Anna Hartmann walked into an uncertain future, carrying her guilt and her determination in equal measure. The war was over, but the work, the real work of healing, rebuilding, and remembering was just beginning, and she would face it the only way she knew how, one patient at a time, one act of care at a time. Until the day she could finally meet her own reflection without flinching. That day seemed distant. Perhaps it would never come. But she would keep trying, because that, in the end, was all anyone could do. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.